Hello Anisha, I got some good responses about the last time I made this, and I'm intending to use Vesina as long as she's here before she leaves to the US to show you all my books, all the ones that I've read, and talk about them and finish my bookshelf tour. And I would love to have your responses, and if you like my books, please subscribe and like what I do, so I will feel more that I have more incentive to continue to do so. Well, now we are continuing with this shelf. This is shelf number 6. And this is a shelf of many books that I use. Here are like some of my oldest books. Okay, let's start. This is the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a translation of it. And as some of you might know, the Egyptian Book of the Dead contains many spells and incantations that the dead could use in order to pass to the next life. Here, look, Osiris measuring the heart. And I got this on a sale. I never really used it. Got it on the sale. I paid like nothing for it. So, and it's hardcover, so I had to pick it up while I was in the army. Okay. I have the 20th anniversary of The Spiral Dance by Starhawk. And today it's considered like old-fashioned material, but I really like some of the stuff she published here. For instance, she published Initiation, in which one bleeds, so it doesn't try to be something that it's not. I don't necessarily agree with many of her opinions, but she's a great writer and she can suck you into her world. So it's a good book for beginners if you're like interested in the whole reclaiming tradition. I also have this, the Book of the Dead, Living and Dying, and amazingly enough, in the Israeli pagan community I didn't have much use for it. We're such a young community. We started in like 98. Nobody is dying yet, and when they die alone with their relatives, so all those liturgical, funerary and processes that one could do when accepting one's death, well, maybe it would be useful later, but I love this book. This is a very good book. Okay. Ancient Egyptian Magic by Bob Brer. This is by far the best book on ancient Egyptian magic ever written. And this book is basically the history of ancient Egyptian magic. It doesn't try in any way to be practical a practical book, but it really is written in a very good way about the amulets and the charms and the spells, and in the end there is a collection of spells from ancient Egypt that some of them are feasible and usable today. So if you're interested in the history of the ancient Egyptian magic, and you want to know what it really was and not what the New Age think it is today, this is a wonderful book, one of the best and my favorite book in witchcraft ever. Greek and Roman Necromancy by Daniel Ogden. Daniel Ogden is really the academic authority about everything that is magical in Greece and Rome. And he is also partaking in the series of the witchcraft and magic in Europe that I talked about in my last video. And this really explains everything about the necromantic processes and the magic of the ancient Greek and Romans to contract the dead and use also curse tablets to curse their enemies. So if you're into that, or if you're a priest of any Greek deity, go for it, read it. It's a very difficult read, it's heavy and academic, but you know, it's good for you, it's good for your brain to read such materials. Also, Mysteries of the Dark Moon, The Healing Power of the Dark Goddess, is very recommended to every Hecatian. And yes, I know YouTubers, you have many Hecatians there. Even to all, and those of you that are not Hecatian are Morriganian. So, all the Morriganians, all the Hecatians, go read this book. It's a very philosophical book that talks about, you know, the meaning and the essence of the power of dark goddesses around the history, and also, you know, talking about stuff like, you know, initiation mysteries, Demeter and Persephone, and, you know, all sorts of the dark feminine aspects in the ancient world. It's very good, it's very recommended. Okay, Witchcraft, a Mystery Tradition by Remy Grimassi. That was crap. That was a really crappy book. It's like a rehoused material that people wrote elsewhere, and that's not one of his best books. He has other better books. This book should die, so, you know, showing it to you, don't waste your time on this. Okay. The complete book of incense, oil and brews. And you know, those of you who watch my channel saw the video, like one of my most problematic videos that many people are liking to discuss is the danger of Cunningham books. Yes, it starts here. But I saw Cunningham recipes like copied everywhere. Everywhere you could possibly imagine, I saw a Cunningham book. I saw the recipes from here. So if you're into all those, you know, you're a beginner and you want to know how to make your own incense oils and brews, you can go there. It's mostly white magic. Most of it is about love, healing, the Wiccan Sabbats and stuff like that. There is nothing really outrageous here. But I found this book useful because every time I want to go to this Wiccan Sabbat, you know, I can just dig out the recipe and just make it and bring it, and everybody said that it's really great. And you know, I let the vanillian fumes of Cunningham's Art Nouveau style witchcraft to permeate the air and tell them, oh, it's just a little something I picked off Cunningham. So, you know, I think this is one of his better books actually. So if you're a fan and you don't have this book or you haven't read it, get it. More Cunningham. His Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs. I hate the fact that I didn't find any good replacement for it, but I think that Cunningham is a good encyclopedia writer, and it's a skill. It takes a skill to write an encyclopedia. For instance, Judika Illes, which is one of my favorite authors, she's a great writer, but she's not an encyclopedia writer, so all of her encyclopedias are basically giant textbooks. He knew how to index and make a good encyclopedia. And if you get this and another book about herbal magic from another tradition, hopefully one that has also dark usages of herbs, this is a very good quick reference book. But since it's very castrated, and since it says that calamus is used for spells of luck and protection and doesn't tell you need to identify those as facilitators of mind control herbs, for instance, it has its own problems. So, you know, you can use it to the white light, fluffy magical walkings, but not for the dark, scary walking, and it doesn't give you everything you need to know about herbs and witchcraft. If you get this book, get it as like one of many about the subject. Okay, now, Cunningham Encyclopedia of Magical Crystal, Gem and Metal Magic. Now, I love this one. This is again one of his better ones. And he wrote this book back in 1903 when a lot of the New Age crystals still weren't available. You can find stuff like Bojai and Sugilite here, but you know, it's very limited. But what he does basically is writing considerably long articles about all the common crystals. So if you're a witch and you want to know about the common use of crystals, again, the common positive usage of crystals, and yes, there is negative usage for crystals, and no, it's not written anywhere for a very sad reason, but did you know you can use onyx and carnelian to facilitate a hex that would bring rodents to a specific place, for instance? We need that knowledge. Anyway, back to Cunningham. So, Crystal Gems and Metal Magic is, you know, he writes about amethysts and like all the magical usage of amethysts. He also go into fine in telling us that, you know, that for instance agate is mercurial and it's sacred to Asclepius, and he tells us its power, strength, courage, longevity, gardening, love, healing and protection, and everything you can do with different forms of agate. So this is again a good book for beginners in crystal magic. Me personally, I would prefer the Crystal Bible by Judy Hall, but I'll show it to you later. Okay. the trilogy. Green Witchcraft by Anne Mora. This is the trilogy that took me through the army. I read these books again and again while I was in the army. Now she has this style of writing that makes your brain go to sleep. That you read it and you say, yeah, I agree, yeah, I know this, and then you notice that you finished the book. And you remember nothing of that book after you finished it, because she writes in this mind-numbing, life-affirming way that, you know, takes you someplace. Those are good books. If you can have the attention span to read it and get what she's saying, you know, like focus on the natural green world, focus on, like, you know, the beauty of nature, and the dark and light and the manual, and, you know, and celebrate the Sabbats. Those are some of the best books out there if you want to be a natural witch. But it's also, you know, again, kind of vanilla-y. Even though she doesn't shy from darkness when it's warranted, and it's hinted here, she doesn't elaborate so much. Gay witchcraft. And no, it's not about happy witchcraft. Even though there are some pretty pictures of, yes, men doing tantric stuff here and whatever. Okay. I'm very ambiguous about Christopher Penczak. Some of the books that he has written are absolutely and completely shit, like Instant Magic, that I recently read and reviewed in my channel. But this one was actually warranted, and there is this and there is another book that I don't own that is called The Flowering Broad, Mysteries of the Male Aspect of Witchcraft, that was written by this pedophile from New York. So no, don't get that book. Get this one. This is a very good one that deals with many issues. Well, it gives you like the basics of witchcraft. Again, he feels the need to teach you from zero to something else. He assumes that if you read it, you know nothing about witchcraft, which is a minus. But then you can get into, like, you know, healing all the guilt. And the spells that he gave, you know, and doing like crystal grids that deals with specific people, gay people situations. And, you know, healing addictions, and also and healing homophobia, and, you know, magic that helps gay people deal with their day-to-day life. And this is what we would say in Hebrew. This is a mitzvah. This is a book that was written and was a mitzvah for gay people. So if you're gay and into the craft, I highly recommend this book for you. It would open interesting venues to deal with stuff, and it gives a new standard of how to cluster knowledge about gay witchcraft studies. So it's a good one. Even though I haven't used it all that much. Weirdly enough, I'm such a charismatic person that I dealt with zero homophobia until just now, and, you know, my inner working just took care of themselves. So, but if you need something that specifically supports your journey, go for it. Okay, Paul Beryl, and one of my favorite books on herbalism. Yes, Vicina, get this one. Get this one. Okay. Paul Beryl is Wiccan, but he's an actual Wiccan. He's not a Wiccanese flavored pagan like Cunningham. He's Wiccan, and this book is not encyclopedic enough. Its encyclopedic writing is problematic, but again, look at the volume of knowledge just about Muir, for instance. You know, you have like a long text about what it does and its ritual and magical uses. And since that person is Wiccan, he's more in like, he doesn't write about hexing herbs per se, but it's not so shunned here that he paints all the herbs as like shiny, happy spirits that would only play with you and, you know, in the meadows. So, you know, it's a good one. It's much thicker than the Cunningham Encyclopedia. I every once in a while I take it and I read an entire letter, like the letter A, the letter B, the letter Q, You know, I'm getting all of those, I'm reading, and I love this. This is a great reference book. And also, its companion, The Master Book of Herbalism, it actually does the crazy work of teaching you how to be a herbalist and a witch. Like herbalist, like, you know, in the sense of healing with herbs, using their actual medicinal properties, and how to use them for magic. So this is a good companion book. And he also have in there like stones that goes with the herbs, so the knowledge is like synchronized. For instance, Sardonyx. Sardonyx is a stone associated by Julius with the month of August. Astrologically, it may be associated with the planet Mercury and the zodiac signs of Virgo. The stone is chosen by both Aaron and is in the revelation of the apocalypse. It has been considered magical for a long time. It is often taken and one side engraved to render the stone into a talisman. The most common symbol carved into the stone is that of a quail. Wearing such a talisman is said to allow the person to pass through the world unseen as if invisible. Sardonyx is also said to promote warmth of friendship. It's not a complete thing about Sardonyx because it's also a very powerful protection stone. It's little waves and bands, basically, you know, confuse your enemies. But you know, it's all about with traditions, and it's interesting. Spells of the Solitary Witch. It's a very interesting book, but and it's a good read for solitary witches. And I also like the design, which is very rare for any of those books. But also it has some silly parts to it that I couldn't not laugh while reading those. For instance, she has a tragedy potion recipe that she concocted during the 9/11, which is basically hot chocolate with a few drops of mint essential oils, and she's turning it counterclockwise while crying, "Isis, help me, Isis, help me." And this is her tragedy potion, and like, you know, you can see that she is a very melodramatic witch in this book. It's a very interesting book. I really liked her boundary spells, especially one that contained Janos. Usually, you know, witches today shy from Janos for some weird reason, maybe because, you know, of its representation in Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Ethan Rain and all that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it's a nice one. It gives you inspiration. It's an inspiration little spell book. I like it. And the only book that I read from Aileen Holland, actually. Okay, back to Cunningham. Living Wicca, a further guide to the solitary practitioner. Again, one of its worst. Do I really need to say more? The only thing that is good about this is that it standardized some of the symbols. So you can see some of the people using some of the symbols today. Okay, and I have little stories with those symbols. There was a witch a while back that went to this giant group on Facebook that has many witches. I won't tell you which ones because I don't want to defame anywhere. And she placed one of the symbols from the Cunningham book. And she asked what it is. And I asked, and you know, I didn't answer. I just waited to see what people would respond to this. And nobody responded. So that makes me think that nobody is even reading the Cunningham texts anymore, and I'm kind of, because this was like the low standard. This is like Raven Silverwolf low standard for me, such books. And the fact that nobody's reading them anymore, not even that, and most people learning stuff from the internet is kind of depressing to me. So. Okay, Hawaiian Witchcraft and Spirituality. This book contains much less than one might envision. And I think that the Hawaiian people will be insulted if they actually read this book today. Because their magic, their deities are much more complex than how he portrays them, and also the herbal magic part of it is kind of sad. It's like a sample of seeing, like, you know, a native culture still existing with their magic, but it doesn't give you anything much practical. So if you want to go and study actual Hawaiian magic, read this just to get like the little sample that you can, and then move on with your life. Spirit of the Witch, Religion and Spirituality in Contemporary Witchcraft by Reverend Cremassi. I read this book, and this book came highly recommended, and I read it and I found nothing new, and then I discovered that this book was written with the intent of giving it to non-witch people to understand that we are not Satanists, basically. So if you're out there and you want to bring like the one book to your parents so you can come out safely out of the broom closet, you might consider this, but for your personal library this is not so, this is like not so much. Modern Magic by Nolan Michael Craig. He died recently, by the way. May the god and the goddess rest his soul. This is one of the most important books that standardized ritual magic for the commoners, if one might use such a term nowadays. And he was the roommate in college of Scott Cunningham, and I really think that they had a thing, but I can't prove anything. Anyway, it's a very heavy book that has lots of topics in it, from Grimoire magic to LBRP, Thelemic practices, etc., etc., etc. I know of 2 people that finished reading this book. If you read it, did you finish this book? Tell me if you finished this book, because I'm very curious if you finished this entire 700-page volume. Tell me, please. It's a very good one. It's a very good one to acquire much of needed basic magical information. And by the way, this is the first magic book that I ever got from Amazon when Amazon just opened. So it's a very interesting book. Also next to it is Witchcraft Theory and Practice, the best solitary Wicca book that I have ever encountered, written by Lee DeAngelis, that influenced much one of my favorite celebrity witch, Fiona Horn. She actually met her. She writes about this, I think, in Pop Goes the Witch. And it's a very good basic book that has anything from raising energy to hexing, banishing, graving, and glamours. So, you know, it has a lot of little things, little topics, and it's one of the books that I teach from. It's a very good one. Okay. Le Megaton. The Complete List of Key of Solomon. It's a grimoire. It's the Goetia with all the symbols of the Goetia. If you are into demon summoning and you don't have this, you are missing out, people. Okay. The next book is Hecate Sotiera, which is about the roles of Hecate in the Chaldean oracles. Basically, you know, a little bit of history and knowledge about Hecate. It's an academic book. I have quoted it in several of the works that I have been through. And this is basically telling where Hecate is in the cosmology, and it translates many of the texts. So if you are a Hecatean, read this. It's good for you. It's much better for you for anything that Sarita de Este has ever written in knowledge and the quantum and understanding where Hecate stands with the Olympians and its sources as an ancient goddess. It's very interesting, you know, to read more about ancient goddesses that are so ancient that they are basically prehistorical because they predated the written word. So it's very interesting. But it's a heavy reading. It's a heavy reading. Okay. The Conjure Cookbook, Making Magic with Oil, Incenses, Powers and Baths by Talia Felix. This is for you, Vasina. You would like this one also very much. This is like one of my favorite basic hoodoo books. Messina is going to the US at some point. And since she's going to the US at some point, you know, hoodoo would be the thing for her to practice when she gets there because it's so available and so, you know, suited to the place. And it has many of the basic recipes like calming, can't stay away, you know, lodestone, look me over, love, love breaker, love uncrossing, you know, all sorts of recipes. And you know, most of the things that Talia Felix wrote are very moderately good. They are not like the best, but this is her best book in my for my taste, and I would never go anywhere without it. You know, especially when one within the condition formula that has not yet been published. You know, you need to go there and look for it. If you can't find it in the Herman Slater books, which I don't own by the way, but are kind of useless today, you can find it here or, you know, in the Catherine Ironwood texts. But this is a good basic thing, you know, to make the oils, the incenses, the powders and the charms. Okay, Golden Secrets of Mystic Oils by Anna Riva. This actually doesn't give you any recipes, but if you know Anna Riva's materials, they are basically, you know, oils with scent and color, and basically that's it. The company doesn't make anything with herbs anymore, so it's not so important. But if you like found like weird oil, like, let's see, like mummy oil, and you didn't know what it does, it tells you what the oil does and how to use it. This is the guide of how to use like pre-made oils. And if you know enough herbs, you can, like, you know, you can make the recipe yourself. It would be much better than actually going and buying your oils. You can buy her oils and then you can steep some herbs in there and, you know, make them your own, which is, you know, what you would do if you wouldn't have any patience for your herbs to actually saturate in the oil for 3 months. So you can play with it. You can play with it. Q oil, for instance. Nobody seems to know where the Q comes from or what its full name. Today it's also known as Q oil or oil of Q. It is woman's perfume for one desires to arouse sensuous thoughts or sexual desires in another. Very enticing, so use cautiously. And Q oils, I know from my studies, the Q stands for queen oil. It's the oil you wear for you to become like a queen. So, you know, there are many traditional recipes, but those are usually not even online. So, you know, I told you a secret that even Anna herself did not know. Okay. Root work. Very basic, very nice hoodoo spells and African spells. There is a lot about, like, you know, sympathetic magic here. It's a good basic thing to have when you don't have a lot of stuff to do or you want to make very simple rituals. It's a very nice one. Cakes and A's for the pagan souls, spells, recipes and reflections from neo-pagan elders and teachers. Growing up in Israel without a community, because I spent many years alone, made me miss other pagans and other viewpoints. And most of the books out there are usually, you know, instructional books, and nobody's like telling you, like, you know, there is no one to talk to. So since I had no one to talk to, I would read like stories that those people would have written. And, you know, this one actually has both the stories and recipes, also magical recipes, like how to enchant your ring for protection and stuff like that. So I really like this tiny little book that is also practical and also has like little stories about how people dealt with stuff. And I think there is one here about how Starhawk went to the G8 meeting and how they casted spells to influence the result of those meetings. So, you know, it's in here. It's a nice one if you're interested in the political history of some of the pagan elders today. This is a Hebrew shamanism book that is shit. Magical Potions by Green Danwich. when this came out, that was like the first magical potion book in history, I think, that actually gave you recipes about potions. And she gives you all sorts of herbal medicine, like potion for constipation or cough, and scrying salves and stuff like that. Most of it has an historical view, and it has some oils recipes, but today there are other better books, so it's like it's kind of redundant. You can skip that one. A Wiccan book, a Wiccan Guide to Prophecy and Divination. This is actually not a guidebook, but actually, a dictionary. You open it and it tells you, like, what is psychographology, for instance. What is what? How different divination methods is working. I don't think that one should own this book, but I think this book should be in a library if you are researching different forms of divination to see what is good for you. You need its name to go in Google and see what it is. So, this could be useful for you. For instance, Genaphylology, the astrological science, art, and practice of calculating future events, studying personal characteristics from influence of the stars at the moment of that person's birth, for instance, It has a lot of information. So, also if you are a teacher, this would be good for you. I haven't read the Wicca Garden. Oh, and this is the Hebrew translation that came out in '92. Magic, a beginner's guide by Draja Mikharik. It looks precisely the same in English, and it's a horrible, horrible little book. Horrible, horrible, horrible. That tells you basically, it gives you some snippets of information about magic, telling the history of the writer, and tells you basically to go find a teacher. That was impossible in Israel of '92. Not that it's so possible today to find a teacher in Israel. I'm one of the only ones, so... and some other sort of charlatans. But anyway, it's really nothing. Skip this book. He has other books that are much better. Exploring Scrying, how to divine the future and make the most of it. Actually, this one doesn't contain so much information as well, but if you are into crystal ball, scrying and stuff, this is good for you. It's a very nice little pamphlet that helps you to understand how to do stuff and get all sorts of tips. This one is not a magic book, but it does magical things. This is a book about manipulation, and witches need to know how to manipulate people to do as they please. So, knowing how to manipulate people is very important. So this is in my witchcraft books because it has been tremendously helpful for me to use it throughout the years. Aren't you using manipulation every once in a while?
I might.
She's giving me the innocent game face she's so good at. Beyond Fortune, the Mystical Kabbalah. If I thought her psychic self-defense was overbearing, this was way much more overbearing. Again, there are better texts today dealing with such a subject. You can let it go now. We can let go of old New Age books that wouldn't serve you, but we like it because the woman was in the Golden Dawn. I just couldn't go for it, so it's like new. But it's interesting to open it and see references. She makes a very good appendixes, so you can read a specific subject here and not all the book. Like the yoga of the West, the method of Kabbalah, the unwritten Kabbalah, blah 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 blah. The Etz Chaim, they have such terrible Hebrew, terrible Hebrew. The Veil's Edge, Exploring the Boundaries of Magic, Willow Paulson, the author of Sabbath Entertaining. Well, that's a very interesting book. she deals like with the veils between the worlds and how to use like time and space magic and things like that, but with a very neo-pagan point of view, which limits her somewhat, because I don't think she really gives anything really new here. But this would be like an intermediary witchcraft book that helps you go on, you know, from after you learn to cast your first basic spells. So, you know, it deals with also shape-shifting, or the basic art of shape-shifting and being possessed by deities and how to prepare oneself for it. And it's written in a very concise way, so I like this book. I like this book a lot. Phyllis Caro, I think you don't write, you read the end, it's Caro. Witchcrafting, a spiritual guide of making magic. It's another very nice basic book, but again it's a little bit presumptuous, because, you know, it deals, it's like, you know, she assumes you can gather all the materials and deal with everything, which you can in a situation where you have money and the internet, but that's not always the case. But she writes very well, and she deals with several subjects that, you know, that are interesting, like the subject of naming, like using names and removing a name from a situation and thus allowing the situation to grow and change. She has the soul of a chaos magician, even though she writes in a Wiccan way. Basic Magic by Philip Cooper. This is one of the best magic books ever written, people. Get it. Even though it's no longer in print, and I saw copies sold for thousands of dollars nowadays, it's one of the best books about magic and how to work magic and what one needs for magic. And it's written in a very concise, thoughtful way that shows you how you can deal with, you know, different situations. And again, he's a very much ritual magician in heart. He goes out from the situation believing that spirits do not exist, that it's all manifestation of the subconscious, and thus he goes into the psychology of the subconscious, working with the subconscious to deal with the shifting and the changing of things in our world. And he gives very powerful exercises. This is basically like, you know, this gave me like the backbone of my practice today. It's very good, extremely good. This is a crystal book that was written in Hebrew, and it's meh, I let it go. Where Witchcraft Lives by Doreen Valiente. I haven't read it yet, but it's one of the first books she has ever written. Okay. Jambalaya, the Natural Woman book of personal charms and practical rituals. Now, don't be mistaken, there is almost nothing here that is completely for women. It's like, it's a very good book to read for men. This is a good book that is intermediary between Wicca and Voodoo, basically. It's like, if you're neo-pagan and you're interested in Voodoo or like African aspect of the craft, this is a very good introduction for you. So go read it. It has correspondences for the Orishas. And she herself is an initiate. She had a birthday a few days ago. She is an initiate of Oshun, like me. And she tells about her childhood in New Orleans and all sorts of stories, and gives like tables of correspondences and how to do spiritual baths. Before there were any texts about ritual baths, she gave you like the most basic ritual bath, like how to make a white bath to cleanse yourself, and like, you know, green bath to send money to you and other stuff. It's a very good one. I like it. I would have it in any library that I have. Magical Herbalism by Scott Cunningham. It's a very nice book. Actually, one of his better ones. I liked it more than the Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs because it deals with different things like how to make herbal amulets. And again, you see like the Art Nouveau art here that is very special, like, you know, the woman sitting in the windflower garden and, you know, being all goddessian, and no pagan woman ever looked like that, sadly. That perfection of everything, it's like part of the philosophy of the text itself. Also, you know, the one thing that I actually remember from this book, besides being more concise and less rumbly, look at this, this is so Mucha. This is so Alphonse Mucha. Is that it says that you can use clover to avoid being forcefully recruited to the army, which is like, you know, the ancestral memory of the 60s that Cunningham kept with him. He was alive during the 60s, but kept this with him. So it's a nice Cunningham book. If you want to read a nice one that wouldn't traumatize you too much with lectures about using, you know, avoiding black magic, then read this one. It's a nice one.